Hello everyone. So I think we first do a quick introduction. So I'm Momir from RSG. I've been investing in RSG for past 2.5 years. And I'm also self-proclaimed CPDO of Gelato Network. Yeah.
I'm Hilmar from Gelato Network. I just came to town, so probably skip me.
I'm Fabian, I'm the co-founder of Caf Network, and we are building a fully decentralized data.
I'm Marijo from Footprint Analytics. We're building the easy-to-use analytics tool.
Hi, my name is Radman, and I'm the co-founder of Solidity. We are building real-time risk frameworks for DeFi-specific applications.
Alright, thank you all for joining the panel today. I think there is no specific order we need to follow, so start with BG. So how does Footprint positions in the data landscape, and what sort of pain points are you guys resolving?
I must say several segmentations. So I guess firstly we see ourselves as an analytics tool. We're trying to find the balance between easiness of use and the flexibility, because you may know that there are quite a lot of solutions which are allowing flexibility, like the SQL implementations or another policy, but also there are different solutions that are having the preconditioned with hard-coded scenarios, which are beautiful in terms of UX, but not that flexible. Yeah, we're trying to be somewhere in the middle. We have parsed quite a lot of chains for now, and I must say that the analytics UI is just an interface that we're working on. The main feature is the dataset, which is built on top of the quite sophisticated modern data science stack, and just building interfaces around is what we're doing. So this is about the segmentation. So number one, we're the analytical tools that is having the easy drag and drop interface, which is basically an abstraction over SQL. So you can use it without any technical prerequisites of knowing SQL or any other programming language. And the second part, we're also serving the different protocols by allowing the software integrations on top of the data set.
Great, thanks. Marijo, how about Solidity? Do you guys position as a data middleware or like a standalone application?
For us, it's more connected with the end user who is going to use our solution. And in the first step, we are building customizable real-time risk frameworks who are more or less centralized. And our customer base is, of course, with that centralized, and they see it more as a dashboard and an end solution they can use with APIs for integration. But we are in parallel already started activities about decentralization, and then of course we are more of a middleware for DeFi protocols who can then implement our solution to get real-time risk outputs in the
Right. And Hilmar, you just showed like a Gelato ecosystem map having like more than 200 projects like built on top of Gelato, so you're obviously like a data middleware. Most of these projects actually come from which verticals? Like I assume largest percentage is DeFi, but then what besides DeFi?
Yeah, DeFi is definitely still the largest segment of the use cases, but we do see a fairly growing quantity of transactions coming in from socials and gaming projects as well. Onchain gaming projects, there's a bunch of functions and things that have to happen recurrently, conditionally on-chain, also where you need off-chain data to enrich the gaming experience. And so this is actually a fairly growing segment, but I think to this day, I think this is still below 10% of all the overall transactions. And if you look at the particular use cases that these protocols use us for, you have a bunch of like investment fund related transactions, let's say rebalancing of portfolios, harvesting of vaults, recompounding of fees, then a lot of like algorithmic stable coins. I think probably everyone uses Gelato these days to like.
Is anybody still alive?
They are. At least they're rebasing, so I'm not sure if anyone holds them.
They're paying fees.
They're paying for transactions, right? But they're like rebasing. And then like a lot of just like rewards, payouts across multiple chains and stuff. And then I think still like time-weighted average price oracles and oracle updates and updating like initiating request response schemes is still quite a huge drive as well. So yeah, it's fairly widespread.
So TWAP would usually come from Uniswap, but then you guys would be the one initiating the update, or?
It's either you want to use Uniswap v2 like TWAPs, or you want to make the Uniswap v3 TWAPs a bit more robust because they're still prone to attack a lot of scenarios, or you just want to request actually off-chain price feeds to then come in when there's no active price feed being operated and paid for by any other party, right? So.
For those that are not familiar, what would be like the major advantage of TWAP versus like let's say any like Chainlink price feed?
It's a rabbit hole. The difference you can think about is it's one actually incorporates like the volume as well. So it's like a volume weighted average price, and the other one is more like a time weighted average price. So you can just say, hey, every 30 minutes we look at the price and then we sort of average it out, whereas the others also take into account specific volumes, and this is slightly more secure because if no volume, if it's a very illiquid market, the cost of actually manipulating time-weighted average price feeds is not that high. And there are like, I think, papers these days about it, but yeah, both have their pros and cons. The cool thing about the TWAP and Uniswap v3 or 2 is everyone can just like spin it up super easily. It's permissionless, and you can just like set up for arbitrary pairs, which doesn't work of course right now.
Got it. Fabian, so Kyrie is positioning like as one of the critical pieces of Arif tech stack. Can you explain like the importance of data validation and why Kyrie is like building in this direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm actually sitting in the perfect position because we are right between Gelato and the data analytics. So actually what you explained in your presentation where you showed the graphic where Gelato was responsible for computation, and there is this need for trustless data and trustless data access. That's exactly what we're doing with Hive, right? So we're making sure that you have maybe off-chain data where there's no idea if it's like valid or invalid. That's exactly what Skype is doing. So we are requesting different APIs, making sure we make the data trustless. We work with other blockchains and making their data trustless, building an archive for that. And then we also offer tooling into data warehouses through an ETL pipeline. We basically, if you're a developer and you have to deal with the complexity of multi-chain, right? You don't have to write any code. You just point it to this chain or that chain, and then you just spin it up, click one button, and it gets translated into your data warehouse. So actually I would say that's quite a positioning between computation, but also between data analytics.
So you're also providing ETL services to other projects, right?
Yes, actually, that's actually a feature we just announced yesterday. So it's a very new feature on our side, but it's like a tooling we have that we can build on top of the trustless data lake we're building.
And then who do you see working with? Like you provide these ETL services, let's say, for some data analytics platforms, or like for projects managing their off-chain data storage, or?
Yeah, actually you can use it for multiple purposes. Like you can, of course, just go and take the data and put it into your own data warehouse. Like if you're running your own analytics, like a Spark cluster, something we see on, especially some accounting solutions, they're like highly interested in that right now, right, where they have the need of like doing some more complex analytics. But then, as I think you said quite nicely, you don't know what is the right technology, right? Maybe GraphQL with the graph is good for like deep queries, but I want to get a broader picture, so I might want to use this technology over that, so it kind of gives them the flexibility. And then of course also for node operators, right? I mean, they still use the Web2 databases, they still use a Postgres, a LevelDB, a RocksDB, and if they want to sync their node, right, they have to get this data into the node. So I think the ETL pipeline really covers very broad use cases, kind of applications on that side.
Maybe a question for BG and Marijo. Are you guys like using third party for ETL, or like you're doing that yourself? Like how do you get on-chain data and organize it?
We are running, as well, we are already running our own nodes. We learn basically by trusting with third-party services, you are not always getting accurate data. For example, in the case of yields, and by running nodes and getting the elements, how to calculate the yields, we are able to standardize the whole yield picture. And also from the risk data, wherever, like when we're talking about Onchain data, we try running the nodes by ourselves. But of course, we have also the second part, which is Softchain, and this is a different story.
Yeah, we're mostly also running our nodes and querying the data from there.
And Fabian, once you are extracting the data, you also provide guarantees that the data you read is accurate, or is that out of the scope?
No, that's actually something we are doing in the load or transform, in the load step. So because on Hive, on the chain, we store the hash of the data that got uploaded, and that's already found to be valid, right? When loading it into your data warehouse, during the loading step is where we also do a check if that's actually correct. And super interesting, you guys are running your own node infrastructure, because we were talking to a customer that had the problem. They were an accounting service, and they had the problem that they were actually not making enough profit, because they had quite some high costs, but they had to maintain all this node infrastructure, maintain the huge data team behind this, right? And so this is why they kind of reached out to us and were like, hey, actually, this ETL pipeline is very interesting for us because it cuts so much cost on your side, because you don't have to, maintain any active data teams, right? And so on and so on. So I think it's just a really kind of like nice tooling we would set in this ecosystem on that.
Is there like some overlap over here with Gelato, like part of reading the data?
Yeah, I think reading the data is still unsolved. It still puzzles me. If I talk to projects, everyone still has problems with it, and it's usually also in terms of the reliability of the actual data and catching the edge cases on Polygon with reorgs and whatnot. And so I think there are so many different custom built indexing systems out there where it's puzzling. And this industry, like this space, I think it's just ripe for some solutions that solve it in like a scalable way, not only for other middleware and sort of B2B projects, but then also for just like use applications. Right now, as everyone, we try to make our system, for example, work, because obviously we have to read data as well a lot, and we have to react to that data, so we need fast and accurate data. So we started at the very beginning, like using the graph to try to figure out if that works. But especially on like faster chains like Polygon and stuff, it just the latency is not there, and the performance wasn't accurate enough. It wasn't fast enough that we had to basically build our whole in-house system into the Gelato nodes itself. So they're now indexing the network and then reacting to that data and sending transactions based on that. Yeah.
So originally you would prefer to use like a third-party solution, but there was just nothing available.
I believe what will win is this very modular middleware system where you have the different building blocks and then you bundle them together in like offerings, and then these bundles will then be used by end user applications for the whole backend, basically for the whole entire Web3 backend. And yeah, for us it was just there wasn't any out there that worked. So
yeah, so I think I'm now doing business development for Hive a little bit. Yeah, I'll assume another position.
I thought you were my business development guy.
No, you're gonna be the client of Hive, like. But okay. So one like buzzword in Web3, like composability, I think also important for each of your projects, starting from Gelato, that has a ton of applications, like one of the most popular ones being like Arrakis, that was kind of spinned out of by the Gelato team, right? Can you elaborate for the audience like what sort of services like Gelato provides, like to Arrakis and some other some of the largest protocols that are built on top of Gelato infra?
Yeah. So I think where we sort of maybe you saw the infographic or the diagram I drew in my presentation, but basically, so like the goal for Gelato is say, hey, you others, it's very much about the right now on-chain computation part. So hey, what sort of on-chain computations do we have to run off-chain, and then sort of execute transactions based on these. And then we hope that more and more off-chain computation will now also be done, but this is fairly new.
And generally, how long does it take for a project to integrate with integrate the Gelato backend?
It is. I would hope it's very easy, but like I think we have to differentiate between how long does it take to like integrate Gelato, and then like what are maybe the sort of like BD cycles of Gelato. That might be interesting as well. Like the like how long does it take to integrate? You can integrate it in like on like an afternoon, because it's fully on-chain. Like Gelato is an on-chain protocol, so you actually interact with it on-chain. You can basically spin up backends with an on-chain transaction. You create an on-chain transaction that points to an hash that defines a given like a WASM script that is being deployed and lives on IPFS, that then triggers an event that then Gelato nodes query to spin up that containerized WASM script and run it for you. So it's a fully on-chain API, so you can, if you have that sort of ready, you can write it in like an afternoon and deploy it. But then like the real like BD sales cycles with some of these projects varies a lot. Like we had projects that we started talking to 400 days ago that now choose Gelato. Like it's crazy sometimes. But
yeah, I think I should join full time for BD.
Yeah. No, but it's not, because it has like, they have the infrastructure, and of course they don't migrate the entire infrastructure the next day, right? It's sort of like a process where you need to do migration. So usually they run it in parallel for some time, and then they switch over completely.
I see. BG Footprint recently announced like API, right? I believe like still relatively like limited data, but soon gonna enable like access to all of the whole database. Do you envision like projects like spinning off their own analytics website and like taking traffic from Footprint by reading like Footprint API, or like do you expect data analysts like just to keep creating dashboards within like the Footprint front end?
Good question. We'll see how it works. So eventually, we're having to market segments. So first are the analysts and the developers, and we're considering it to be a serial process for developers, as one could simply access on website, could simply build a chart, could like validate whether the data one is getting, which is visualized, is correct and okay to be used. And keeping that in mind, that most of our data stack is being implemented within the SQL. You can basically migrate every query that you make on website to the SQL API, so that you can build your own visualizations, like, or any form of software integration. So yes, we see it as a serial process which covers two different segments, which isn't like which aren't contradicting one each other. So yeah, we're expecting both sides to be used.
The reason why I'm asking is because like often I would think like if Footprint or like Dune had API, like I would spin off like easily like few data analytics website with like very useful information. Otherwise, like I have to start doing everything myself, and there's just no time to like run the whole infrastructure. But then like when there is API available, like if you have interesting ideas, just like I feel as a contributor to some of these like open data analytics platforms, like I feel sometimes like I would be better rewarded if I just like spin off and like build my own website based on the code I built on top of like Footprint or Dune. But in general, like what do you find is the main incentive for like contributors like to publish analytics on top of the platform such as Footprint?
Yeah, we have quite a unique data organization, which is could simply be described as a three layers, as we're calling it. So there's a bronze level for row transactions, where basically all row transactions, traces, logs are stored, and also events, and it's like possible to go through all these events and extract the business metrics out of there manually. But of course, you have to understand the like internal logic of smart contract, or like if we're dealing with different platforms with different entities which are like being solving the same issues as a smart contract. And but apart from the bronze level, we're having the under the hood, the pre-aggregations, which are also put in our ETL, that are basically calculating the business metrics out of the hood. So what's important to understand is that our potential clients are not only the like client applications, the protocols that wants to use our data. So we're also offering services for different media, and it's like easy for them to embed our dashboards, or simply like, again, like just query our data set with drag and drop interface and then consecutively embed it. Regarding the incentives, there are economic incentives, of course, yet not really announced and implemented within our platform. But yeah, we're thinking about launching the tokenization of footprint. So yet there is no such aspect, I guess, on our platform. But at the end, those silver and gold level tables are allowing, without any technical prerequisites or even the domain knowledge, to get some insights from the blockchain. That way, making the decisions and reducing the noise in social media, for instance. So, yeah.
Makes sense. The way I was rationalizing it is mostly that I get like free access to data, and in exchange I contribute to the platform by like generating traffic for them if I create like some interesting like data insights. So that's sort of my perspective, and I think there are also a lot of intangibles, because like by just building your data science profile, you can literally like bring your status in the industry and get access to many different opportunities. So I think like from my perspective, I feel like these are the ways how I rationalize like not being directly rewarded from the platform. But yes, Marijo. So you mentioned building like risk frameworks. As we talk about composability still, how can these like risk frameworks be leveraged in some like DeFi applications, or like maybe not only DeFi? Yeah, can you share some insights on this?
Yeah, of course. I mean, once we have the frameworks ready and they are customizable, the first logical use case would be like in direction of yield aggregations. Currently, these protocols or these solutions are executing directly according to our strategy, which is predefined. What we are providing is basically intelligence to them by utilizing machine learning models, utilizing this data, what we have, and creating more advanced algorithms, trading algorithms. This is the first logical case. Of course, this data can be used also for other cases. We see now new narratives coming up, like under-collateralized loans. To calculate the credit score, you will need a lot of data, you will need a lot of risk data, not only on-chain data, but also off-chain data, historical off-chain data. And then when you take the wallet address and the transaction history, you have somehow, you need some kind of data to put it in some kind of relation to calculate some kind of metrics, you are able to calculate the credit score. This is the second case. And the third case we are also looking into is like, there is, when you look at the traditional financial world, there are a lot of these indexes, like from volatility index, a lot of risk-related products, and we believe once we come up with our solution out, these new kind of products are going to be enabled. We also lastly saw solutions where some kind of bond market simulation is done, or emulation, and for that you will need also risk data when you do your calculations, and we believe we can provide all the necessary data they need for the calculation.
And do you place more value on data or machine learning models?
I mean, this is also really connected to the time horizon you're looking at. As we, at this moment, data is king, because data is not available. And then we have to there is a difference in data. You have on-chain data, which is more or less currently available, but not easy to get. Let's say in 1 or 2 years, this is also going to change. It's going to be like very easy to be accessible. And the second part is, of course, off-chain data. Off-chain data is going to be always valuable, because once you go in a direction of building any kind of machine learning models or even deep learning models or whatever, you will need a lot of data points, and then off-chain data is not easy to get. Basically, everything what you're not getting now is lost, and it's basically advantage of Solidity. But what I believe is like over a time horizon of, I'm not quite sure, like 1 to 3 years, when this maybe even off-chain data is going to be kind of available, as services will pop up who will provide this kind of data, selling this data, then computation will play a major role. And then it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of computation. Is it off-chain computation, on-chain computation, how to do these kind of algorithms, in which way, and then I would say like in a mid to long term way of looking, computation could play a more important role than the data.
Got it. Yeah, thank you. Fabian, also talking about composability, what sort of like applications can be built on top of like trustless data that you guys provide? Like where do you see this industry developing?
Yeah, I actually think you can build any application on top of trustless data, like any Web3 application. Because I mean, as you said quite correctly, like data is king right now because it's so hard to get. And I think once we have the data, then we can do anything on top of it, right? We can run computation, we can do analytics, we can do machine learning things and stuff like that. So I also think from a infrastructure composability point of view, right? Having like this base layer, like right now, I mean, your Amazon S3 probably, right? Which is the source for so many data structures right now. It's kind of like what like maybe we at Kai are building with our decentralized data lake. And then it's like really going to the same composability as Web2 is composable right now, where I would say any professional project doesn't use like WordPress site, right? Because there is not one like solution that gives you all you need usually. It's usually like the more complex your use case gets, the more you need to kind of diversify in your backend structure, right? So I think with Gelato and the computation, right? Maybe with us and storage, maybe then some kind of like off-chain analytics for like some internal insights and stuff is the key where the whole industry is going in the next years.
But providing like guarantees of trustlessness and accuracy, I assume it's also somewhat expensive. So like I feel that like building on top of this trustless data makes sense, like if you want to connect it directly to smart contracts. Otherwise, if I want to do certain like off-chain computation, there's probably or something that's not going to have an output that goes back to smart contract. I probably just prefer to get data from like a cheaper source. Would that be accurate?
I actually don't know if I would agree with that, because in the end, the damage that you will probably get from working with inaccurate data is always expensive. Either it's wrong insights into your teams that can really screw you over, right? If you make wrong business decisions because you have wrong data inputs. I mean, on-chain, we see this happening with a lot of Oracle hacks right now, where they just get drained. Like the whole network just gets drained because everything is not made for being corrupted. So I also think it's like working with data that you can, like that is trustless and it's valid, is going to be the key thing. Otherwise, we're really building this 2008 financial crisis model in data infrastructure right now, where we are stacking insecure data infrastructure on top of each other, and it's just a matter of time until this whole thing collapses. Because to be honest, all the effort we're right now putting into building Web3 and building blockchains, which is such a ridiculous amount given how good the tooling in Web2 is. But the reason why we're building Web3 is because we expect this one person, the smartest person maybe on the planet, to screw up your protocol. Right? There can be one person that can destroy the whole thing, and that's why we need to make sure everything stays fully trustless and fully, truly decentralized, so we don't expose ourselves to this unnecessary attack vector.
Makes sense. Just to follow up on this, like there is one project that is building like data infrastructure on top of Starkware, and the founder, he was like working for a high frequency hedge fund, and his like main role was just to clean Bloomberg data, which is like super expensive but still contains a lot of errors, so they require like at least one full-time position just to make sure data is accurate before making any business decisions. So that goes like to support like your argument to some extent. All right, the next question is a bit more general. It's like, is the moat in middleware or in the application? I feel like there was a lot of discussion recently, and it seems that there is like a bias from also VCs and the funds like to invest into infrastructure. It seems like a safer bet for everyone, and then everybody is also trying to position like at the lower in the tech stack. So are you going to be my client? I'm not going to serve you or whatever. But then like we also had examples of some applications that come out like find product market fit and then screw your infrastructure, right? Like I'm just now that I have product market fit, I can rebuild like the tech stack myself, or like even like the projects that are integrating, like building business of integrating other protocols like aggregators are also one of the projects that have like a best product market fit out there. So considering these like two contradictory like ways of thinking, on which side are you? Do you feel like that the moat is in being like a middleware or being application?
So,
whoever, yeah, you can go.
I'm happy to sound that, because I have a very nice analogy from an investor I spoke with who is almost exclusively investing into infrastructure projects. And we were sitting in Paris, and he was pointing to me to one of the old buildings in Paris, and he said, listen, I'm an investor. I don't want to invest in whatever cool like fashion shop or hipster cafe might be go into this like house. It's like what's truly valuable is the house, and it's standing for hundreds of years. Right? That's where you as an investor kind of want to invest in. You want to make sure that you build with very long-lasting, sustainable infrastructure, right? And then as you kind of said, well, then the applications are then the shops that go in and out of the house, right? So, and also, I mean, you don't want to be in a building that's built on top of sand, right? It's like you want to have this really kind of like solid fundamentals you're working with, and so I think it's very kind of like crucial to push into that direction and kind of get it implemented into everyone's minds that right now data infrastructure is going to be the foundation of Web3 for the future, and this has to be done right. Right, and then of course we can then start, well, having applications being built on top of that, because we can then securely say, hey, you can really trust us, and you don't have to kind of expose yourself to some unnecessary risks. I mean, this is kind of what we see happening, like all the bridges are getting hacked, and to be honest, every project that is involved with a bridge that got hacked got really torn down, right? Moonbeam and Nomad and everything, it's like, it's all going down. Exa Infinity, Ronin, it's like so important working with secure infrastructure. Really, really important.
Want to jump in?
Yeah, I think there are two parts, right? So one part is the applications just building the stack themselves and sort of vertically integrating themselves. I think that makes sense if you either gain cost benefits or flexibility, right? Where I don't see, like for example, I can speak about ourselves with Gelato. Like what we've seen is that you actually gain cost benefits from more people using the network, because the fixed costs of operating the infrastructure plus the shared cost of actually querying given state and analyzing blocks can be shared among multiple projects. So rather than you having to query every single block of every single chain, you share that cost with like a bunch of other projects, and the unit cost of then getting to your particular state in that particular a block that you want to analyze is actually lower if you just like share a bunch of like the work between multiple projects. So cost benefit wise, it's not like rolling out your own blockchain with middleware, where of course you get cheaper cost if you're the only one that sends transaction on a centralized network, right?
But then you have like 4 out of 9 validators hacked and everything goes to hell.
And that might be fine, right? So for games, that's totally fine, I think. But I think for middleware projects, there's actually, I think, an argument of there's reduced cost, but of course,
there's always you sacrifice flexibility because you have to adhere to certain rules that the network defines, and I can definitely see like big, like the next Facebooks that are being built on Web3, they might want to vertically integrate at some point because they need super flexible gas price algorithms that are only custom to themselves, who knows, but I think these infrastructure projects, they need to strive to be as flexible as possible, and then I think there's the discussion about, okay, is there a mode between different infrastructure projects, right? Because I think infrastructure will be there in middleware and it will be used and there's clear value there, but then between these middleware projects, I think there will be it will be fairly competitive, and I think their modes will be fairly small. And I think that's also good because like the worst thing we could do is like have one network and then everyone relies on it, and then it's like this one network somehow has a flaw or there's a client implementation that went wrong, and then the whole Web3 breaks down, right? So there should be multiple projects that do multiple things where people have fairly low switching cost and they can move between them, and then I think it will be fairly commoditized. And then, yeah, you have to be out there and do proper marketing and BD, I think.
It all goes back to BD.
To you.
I personally believe, like, at the current point of time, probably like to be middleware is safer. Also because to build applications, you need a lot of elements which has to be ready to build something amazing. Like even if you start with user experience. And if this is not solved, basically when you're doing middleware, if these applications even fail, they're using your infrastructure, you are safe, you're getting some kind of revenue. The thing is like, but over time, as the whole ecosystem improves, I guess like middleware is limited from the innovation point of level. Earlier or later, we will reach that point, and they will fight on a price. And these applications which are going to build on top, they have the, let's say, contact to the end user, and with that, they have the possibility of innovation more than middleware. And a good example would be gaming. Imagine like amazing games come out. These games would be able to, if it's a really like playable game and everyone likes it, they can do whatever they want. And basically, middleware is in competition with others from the infrastructure side. They have the prices are defined more or less from the competition side. But if the game is really amazing and they have the end user, they can charge more and more. And I believe what we are currently seeing is like everything is focused on middleware, and over time middleware is going to slowly go down from the interest for VCs, and the application is going to be more and more up when the user experience improves and applications or application elements comes out which enables like amazing stuff which can be built, which is currently not available or possible.
I agree that often is also about like vertical we are talking about. I feel like if you're talking about like finance related applications, that then like going for app chain, I don't think it's very smart. I think like over here like the security is like super important, and I think users in these like that are managing a lot of capital are putting a lot of importance on security. But then like users of gaming projects or like some move to earn projects or like NFT related, I feel like they just don't care whether this like Stepan is like Solana, Ethereum, they probably don't know much about it. They just care for the user experience. So it's possible. I feel like long term, if you envision like a super bullish case where like the global financial stack is built on certain blockchain, then like obviously Ethereum is front runner just because of being the most decentralized, and then like has the best, like most advanced L2 scaling solutions, while the other ones are sacrificing some of the fundamental principles. But then for some of these like applications, it seems it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, it's like when you look, Telecom 2000 was the unicorn of unicorns. They got the whole value capture, and then at one point they are just infrastructure unimportant, and then social media was more important, and so on. And I guess something like that will come to crypto, and something like that will come also to DeFi. At one point, all these protocols are just going to be like more or less infrastructure, and more advanced products are going to build, which are not currently possible, and they will take the whole value of it.
Anything to add?
Well, I guess those markets are complementary, and yeah, they're going to be growing in parallel. So one mostly is built on top of another, and the middleware market, like I guess, is mostly like built and used by the applications themselves. So yeah, yes, yeah.
I see. It seems we are almost running on time, and I didn't even ask half of the questions. But maybe depending on how much time we have left after this one, might be the last one. So how decentralization, how important it is for like the services you guys are providing? Like maybe to start with Gelato, like because like I assume latency is extremely important for you guys, and you don't want to sacrifice it to a certain extent. But then you also provide updates to the smart contracts managing billions. So how do you actually like make the trade-off between the two?
Yeah, I think when building and scaling a project, I think it's the trade, like there's always a trade-off between performance, speed, and decentralization, especially like engineering and development, right? And you just have to be extremely careful how you select it, because it's very hard to sort of revert from it. Our mission is really very focused on the decentralization part, and because there are a lot of centralized infrastructure projects out there that offer similar sort of like functionalities to what Gelato does, but I think recently with like the regulation around like Tornado, OFAC, etc., I think it became apparent that how fragile the system is and how easy it is to just like say, okay, there's, let's say, a social media network on Polygon, and the server runs in Turkey, and then the government just says, no, I don't want you to post anything anymore on this blockchain, right? So I think it will become more and more important, and we are doubling down on it. But from a practical approach of building something, we are like giving choice to our users and to the project. So we say, hey, there's this fully trustless way of using Gelato that you can do, where Gelato is sort of like where there's no trust in us or the node operators. And you can choose to use it that, but you might sacrifice some UX and functionalities, whereas there are also ways where we are offer like more like hosted services type of things, where we say, hey, here you can use this, this, and that, which might be slightly more trusting, where you limit the number of nodes that can actually do it for you, and you have to trust them, but you get extra functionality. So like projects can sort of pick and choose what suits them best, and then games usually tend towards that, and then like the financial ones and the DeFi application, they usually tend towards the other spectrum.
Got it, thanks.
Yeah, actually, for me, it's a very quick answer. I think decentralization is a necessity. I think we have to sacrifice performance for decentralization, for security aspects. I think it's literally just a matter of time if we are working with centralized solutions in some ways until they break. It's just because just the financial motivation for someone to hack a centralized system, and we know that anything can be hacked, is literally not worth it. Like we see it on like X Infinity and others. It's like 4 out of 9 validators decentralized, right? You do a social attack, boom, there you go, $600 million is yours. Terra, right? There was this idea of like, oh, maybe it was like in a coordinated attack, right? We really see that money isn't anything. Money is cheap for the big players, right? They can even take you down on money. And as long as we don't stick to the true core of it, I personally think decentralization is a necessity. Otherwise, this whole, we don't have to sit here and talk about Web3, because the whole space is going to die if we keep stacking like partially decentralized infrastructure on top of each other. Because performance is cool and everything, but I'd rather wait a few more seconds than my funds being gone.
And in the use cases you're working on, do you see any like room for achieving like trustlessness via snag proofs rather than like redundancy, or you feel like it's we are still very far away from that?
Basically, so could you quickly like elaborate on that? Like, do you mean how do you get to a validated state, or yeah?
Because if I understand well, like now you achieve like validated state via redundancy, right? Like which necessarily leads to like replications of computation. Like whether there is like how soon are we to the point where we can replace this with something like proofs, with mathematics instead of like redundancy and consensus?
Yeah, I kind of think it opens up kind of like another question, which is like, when is a piece of data valid, right? And when is it invalid? Is it like if one equals the other, if one is very close to equaling what the others say, like on the pricing, like we have multiple sources, and I just want to find some consensus on it. I think that's kind of like the next big question, like how is this going to be implemented, right? And then also, of course, from there, you can have multiple ways of, well, validating it and decentralizing data points. I just think it's kind of like key achieving that first before giving them off to work for others. And to be honest, and then it's also a question of like, okay, maybe I'm working with like this and that pricing feed, like the I think was it the time-weighted average, right, versus the other algorithm. I think in the end you have to choose what fits your suitcase, your use case best. There you go. And so I just think it's like that is the next big question: which data do we use? But I first have to make sure it's actually secure.
DG footprint interesting in decentralizing their like tech stack.
It's philosophically correct, but it's a very, very non-trivial task to put all over billions of rows to the decentralized infrastructure. In the end, this is something, of course, that we'd like to achieve. Of course, this is always a trade-off between the performance and decentralization, and one can like solve different options to choose. But yeah, it's something that we're working on now. Still, that's not achieved. We're trying to like solve the problem step by step and start with the easiness of use and flexibility, and then to switch to the decentralized architecture or present it as an option.
Anything to add, Marijo?
I mean, we at Solidity are totally relaxed about this topic. We just believe our customers will define what degree of decentralization of all products that has to be. For example, the first product which is targeting, let's say, crypto hedge fund managers or entities who invest in DeFi, they don't need centralization, they don't care about centralization. They need amazing risk frameworks. When we go in the direction of protocols, DeFi, they want to integrate, they care a lot about decentralization. And then, out of the talks we had with these protocols, not everyone has the same definition of decentralization. This is the first case, and not all of them are decentralized. This is like mostly marketing. And then basically what we at Solidity want to be is like ready. It's like you have elements like scraping, storing, computing, putting the data on-chain or through APIs. And we heard different versions of decentralizations, and we want to be able to provide solutions where the customer in the end can choose, and this will be connected with performance and the cost. We can make amazing, totally decentralized solutions, but someone has to pay that. If the customer wants to pay that, then this is going to be the way forward. If they believe we can live with centralized immutable databases, this is the way to go forward. Or if they believe off-chain computation or centralized computation is enough, we are also fine with that. We just want to have a modular as possible infrastructure or architecture that we can serve all of these cases, especially the mainstream ones, to be ready to do them.
Alright, yeah, thank you all. Unfortunately, we are over time, so I have to stop here. But yeah, it was a pleasure. Appreciate your time.